off, man, whenever you're ready to go.
All right, guys. So we're going to be... Whoa, did I go somewhere? Where did I go? What the...
And that's what stress looks like.
Wow. Sorry, guys. I got very stressed out. I had a panic attack, and I decided I couldn't do this anymore.
Very visceral moment.
Had a conversation with myself, and we're back. I don't know what just happened.
You used one of the strategies, right?
All of them at once, very quickly. Breathe. I breathed. Okay, so stress management workshop. I just want you guys to all just pay attention right now. I think it's very relevant. Just everybody, I just want to pause for a second. Pay attention to how you're feeling in this moment and observe your environment. Notice the state you're in. Notice your breathing. Some of you are doing things. Some of you are in a heightened state. Some of you are sitting down in your bed and more relaxed. Okay? Just observe that. Because like part of stress management is just being aware of how you're feeling. Now I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through this workshop. If anybody can't see anything, has any problems, just message in the top right corner. So, what is stress? And why is it important? So, briefly, stress can be encapsulated from so many different influences. We have chemical stress from toxins in our environment. We have a physical stress from things like training and exercise. We have an emotional and cognitive and mental stress. There are so many different facets of stress that build up into what's called allostatic load. That's probably something to note down. It's not in the spreadsheet or in the PowerPoint. Allostatic load being this total burden of stress that builds and builds and eventually overwhelms the person. So when we think about stress, we have to think in totality to not just training or one thing or another, but how do all these things contribute? And so a really nice diagram that I like is this one here. It's that you don't get stronger in the gym. We don't technically adapt in the gym. That is when you can see this red line is when the fatigue and happens, the alarm stage. And it's when we rest and recover to which we get better and adapt. And that can be said of memory, motor skills, and any type of learning. For example, after this presentation, one of the best things you guys can do is rest and just do nothing to let your brain consolidate information. Breakdown of what we're going. So by the end of today, we should have probably a dozen or so different strategies on how to manage stress in a whole bunch of different environments, from training to emotional to mental to different outlets, from journaling to controlling environment to some really obscure ones with that we'll talk about soon. And this is another example that I just really want to hammer home the point that if you and we do not give ourselves time to rest and recover, and it comes through sleep, it comes through mindfulness, it comes through a lower stress environment, which is very difficult for so many people, then the buildup of stress will just continue and continue. And it will be harder to overcome that. And so the one thing that's paramount in this society that we live in is we think more is better. More is always better, right? And there's a lot of A-type personalities in here. And so we would say that you don't actualize all the work you've done until you actually rest. Even David Goggins needs to sleep, right? The hardest workers in the world will need to sleep and rest and recover in order to continue to improve. I love memes. I love The Simpsons because I'm a big child. And I found this funny. How stress eating, I posted something on Instagram the other day, saw like how to eat. And of me just sitting there in the sun, just breathing, right? And how that can contribute to overconsumption of food. Now, Mr. Kant.
All right, thanks for leading us in, Alex. You kind of jumped straight in there. Alex doesn't fuck around, as everyone who knows Alex goes in there. But I have to sort of just backstep a little bit. Thank you, though. We have a wonderful new team member that's going to be presenting today that I'm not too sure if some of you know. So Sophia, wave. Or say hi. Yep. So Sophia is actually, I'll let her introduce herself when she has one of the next slides. But I just wanted to point out it's not just Alex and I presenting. She is a fantastic addition to the team. I have the pleasure of coaching her as well, and she's obviously a terrific coach. So, yep. On to one of the things I really wanted to bring into this workshop was not to spend too much time on what Alex just went through, the physiology of stress. That's a whole workshop in and of itself. And you go through that when you're, becoming a coach or dealing with, stress as part of your career. But today's all about giving you guys some really practical walkaways. Like, I don't want you getting bogged down in the theory of what happens to your body. It's like, well, what can we do about it? And one of the things that I will constantly talk about, and even before I really knew or did much with behavior, when I got into coaching, I began to realize that uncertainty was one of the biggest killers towards compliance. So when I had a client and they just were raising a lot of uncertainty and the stress that goes along with that, it would really kill the ability to see consistency. So I came up with this little thing, and it's one of those things like, when you first start out coaching and just putting together like little PDFs and stuff. And I had this like little cool diagram that said, it was the 3 C's, and it said certainty, confidence, compliancy. You know what I mean? And it wasn't really sort of like scientifically backed or like that I'd really researched that to put that together. That's just what I found clinically. It's what I found on the floor, is that when I could help get someone certain on certain things, they became far more confident at that thing. They stopped worrying and stressing, and that led to consistency. And consistency, as we know, just leads to results. But what is uncertainty? So as you can see there, uncertainty as applied in our everyday life is when we basically anticipate that the outcome of something is different to we think that's what's going on. So it's that we basically think we're in for a surprise, okay? And that's a very stressful situation for the body to be in. So like Alex said before, it's a big contributing factor towards the allostatic load. That is the total combined stresses that your body is under. Now, you may hear us talk about training being a nice hormetic stress. So hormesis, the word basically means it's a kind of stress that gives you enough of a stimulus that gives you a positive adaptation that can occur from that. But in the case of like a total body burden, a very high allostatic load, from other contributing factors like mental stress and psychological things and so on and so forth, put them all together with training, and training can become no longer the hormetic stress. It can just be a contributor towards that total allostatic load. And we're going to be talking about that today. So when it comes to uncertainty, now sometimes this is a contentious issue, right? Because people go, I'm really certain about what stresses me out. And it's like, yeah, you could identify what stresses you out. I get that totally. But sometimes what is actually causing us the anxiety that's behind the thing that we know is, and you can read it there in italics, it's your brain is trying to figure out what strategy should I select to safeguard my future physical, mental, and social well-being. So when you're encountered with a stress or something that's giving you anxiety or uncertainty, what is often playing out in your mind is you're weighing up, do I take plan A? Do I take plan B? Or do I take plan C? And that lack of knowing which thing to do, which path to implement, is something that can give you a lot of stress. So we basically have 3 things that we look at when we're trying to improve uncertainty. The first is attention. So we take on a hypervigilant state, a heightened state of mental arousal. Okay, so we might call that the fight or flight syndrome, which is associated with an increase in energy going towards the brain. Okay, so that does so at the expense of like the other systems within the body. We're just driving glucose up into the brain because the brain's trying to learn. It's trying to figure out, how do I get rid of this uncertainty? What don't I know here? What's going to help me make that decision? The second thing that happens is the learning phase. Okay, and the learning phase is basically when you have all these glucocorticoids, the stress hormones within the brain. It creates a situation where you can the brain is ready to take on a new perception of the world. Okay, and what that means is basically it's going to take your preconceived views and standpoints, and it's going to realize, well, these aren't good enough. What do I need to learn to solve this uncertainty? Because by learning, then I can basically know what needed to be known and reduce my uncertainty that way. And the final point I'd make is this. It's called habituation. And habituation is a form of adaptation when living with uncertainty. And you can basically be one of two people. So a non-habituator, and I want you to think who you are here. A non-habituator is someone who, when you're provoked in stressful situations or uncertain situations ongoing, you always have a really high stress response. Okay, it doesn't diminish over time. Whereas habituator people, they seem to be far more resilient, right? They go, oh, wow, okay, that was uncertain, that was stressful. And then like the next time something similar that occurs, they just have this, it just diminishes really quickly. And they're like, wow, this person just deals with things really quickly. And what they notice is this, and this gets us to the practical takeaway from this slide, is that habituators tend to adopt more realistic expectations about what can be achieved, okay? And in doing so, they update their goal states. And this is what I like about this is basically a feasibility analysis that they do. They don't become too optimistic or unrealistic with either their capacity to do things, whether they've got the time to do it, whether they can't foresee the obstacles, and so on and so forth. And I'm just going to read something here because there's a wonderful author called Kelly McGonigal, and she wrote The Willpower Instinct, which is all about self-control. But she describes defensive pessimism as this. So we always think optimism is the best state to be in, right? Wrong, okay? Especially when it comes to, I'm going to relate this to, say, dieting for a sec, because we're mainly into health, fitness, nutrition, and things like that. Optimists tend to underestimate the setbacks and the pitfalls. They may overestimate their abilities or the outcomes. And this can turn a small success experience, right? So say they're successful, but they're not as successful as they thought they were going to be. It can turn that into a feeling of failure, okay? So it becomes a failure experience because they're let down that they didn't do as well as what they thought they would do. So the people that expect the most rewards are actually the least likely to succeed. And this is it's not a bag out on optimism, because you want to have a sense of optimism that is based in reality. And the way that you do that is you do a feasibility review. And a feasibility review is this. Anyone who coaches with Alex or I already kind of knows what your weekly review looks like. It's a what, why, how. What didn't go your way this week? Why didn't it go your way this week? And how are you going to do something immediately to make that thing better? So that's a post hoc kind of review, but you can get in front of it, okay, and go, well, what are the obstacles that are going to stop me from doing the thing that I'm trying to do next week? Why would they do that? And what's something that I can have ready in case that happens? And that's basically defensive pessimism. So it's not a bad word. It's not a bad terminology. It's about having a set of feasible goals in place so that you can adopt an habituation kind of standpoint as it relates to the uncertainties that you face. Next slide, Alex.
That was really good.
Basking in the afterglow of that,
Yeah.
because I'm next. And can you imagine the amount of anxiety and physiological stress I'm experiencing now, having to follow both Alex and Ben as my first slide? But it's really good. I really enjoyed that. So hello, everyone. I'm Sophia, a self-professed type A behavior and stress head, who has been reformed and back into stress and had to reform based on changes in lifestyle. So this kind of workshop is a little bit of a passion topic. So I'm very, very privileged. I feel honoured to be able to present with the likes of this mob here. So thank you for the opportunity. But I was really happy that Ben actually talked through the different processes in which the brain kind of facilitates information. And so what I'm going to talk about is a little bit more of that psychological aspect, because this was a concept that I found incredibly interesting for me, coming from my experience as quite a high stress behavior, and learning about this particular working memory concept really helped me identify signs and symptoms of acute stress that could also lead to chronic stress. So being able to understand how it all works and how to notice those flags can really reduce the amount of stress you can accumulate later on that's not necessary. So as both Alex and Ben said before, there is a certain amount of stress that will help you perform, but how do you know when it becomes a negative issue? So if we're looking at this working memory model slide that I've got here, Professors Baddeley and Hitch came up with this particular concept. So a little bit of history here. These guys were working on the short-term memory concept back in 1973, 1974, and they were disappointed with the lack of depth in this whole concept of the short-term memory because it was all about information recall, and they thought there's much more going on here. So they developed this working memory model, which is the system that integrates with the short-term memory and can also explain certain symptoms that we may feel when we are coming under stress. So in this particular, I'll explain through this concept map that I made here of the working memory. So in terms of how it works, Baddeley and Hitch suggested that there were 4 components of what we call the working memory, and I like to think of it as a live stream. So this is exactly what you guys are doing right now. You are looking at this screen, you're listening to me talk, you're pairing it with visuals, and you're in a space that is hopefully conducive to learning and consolidating memory. So if we break down these various issues, this is how our brains process information. So if we look at our concept here, at the very top, we have the central executive section, and that is all about attention and focus. So we are really attentive to what's happening here. We're focused on the information, and then it gets processed into different areas. So we've got our phonological loop, which is our auditory processing. So the words that you're hearing, the sounds that you're hearing are being processed right now in our live stream of the working memory. We also have the visual spatial sketchpad, which is our visual and spatial. So what is our environment? Is it conducive to consolidating memory and learning? Are we seeing images that also help us understand the audio? And the episodic buffer, which is an element they later added when they realized that there is a consolidation between the working memory and the long-term memory. So the episodic buffer will actually pick and select information that you find worthy of storing for the long term, take that in, but it will also use lessons learned, decisions made from past memory, and use that to facilitate problem solving and decision making in the working memory. So if you are not tired after listening to me describe that, like that's what your working memory is doing right now. That feeling of it's picking up all this stimulus and is trying to be a Sherlock Holmes, connect the dots. The great thing about the working memory is if it takes information, it has to get rid of it. It is a transit zone. Nothing stays in there because this is the part of our mind that we have to use to problem solve things that happen right now. What are we going to have for dinner? Why is my baby crying? When are we going to pick up such and such from school? We need some space in that memory. So what happens when we get too stressed? Our working memory is one facet that gives us red flags almost immediately. So I've got a couple of points in there that I can go over quickly just to explain some signs and symptoms we can pick up when our working memory is starting to fatigue and stress. Have you ever walked into a room with full confidence and forgotten why you walked in there? Like, yeah, it happened to me like literally yesterday. I was like, oh, never mind, I will try again later. It's that classic TV trope of opening the fridge and finding your car keys in there, or in my case, my child's hat. Like it's one of those things where you miss details. You're not quite sure what happened from A to B. That is one sign that the working memory might be too cluttered. We're looking at inability to consolidate long-term memory. Have you ever read a paragraph 5 times and not actually absorb any of what you've read? Yeah, these are the little signs that kind of tell us something may not be right. And I actually shared in the Daily Quip a book that I really do recommend is called The Language of Coaching by Nick Winkelman. And he talks about the working memory model from a technique teaching standpoint. And he actually described the concept of the working memory really well. He said, think of working memory as a dark room, fixed in size, and attention as the spotlight we use to search it. This room cannot hold much information unless a still is the amount we can pay attention to. So it is literally, it has a limit. If you have so much stimulation, we would say even acute stimulation or chronic, and you have to think of so many things and search for the solution to all these problems, we get things like, which we'll talk about later, your decision fatigue. We get emotional overwhelm, and that can lead to other symptoms of stress that can manifest physically as well as even more emotionally. So this, I thought, was a really great concept to try and just understand kind of the ins and outs of this particular live stream part of your thinking processes that can actually, one, impact your stress, but also communicate to you when stress is about to take over your life.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Sophia.
That's great awareness about how we then process. Ben is now going to help teach us how to journal.
All right. So, just quickly on the journal, actually, it rolls off of what Sophia was just saying then. So one of the things that I've written here is there's two concepts of journaling that is in the literature quite a lot. And one of them is what's called expressive writing, which is kind of like more basic journaling. And then we have PAJ, which is positive affect journaling. And if you look over just on the right-hand side there, you'll see some of the benefits from a physical standpoint, like from a health physical standpoint of journaling. You know, Sophia just sort of mentioned stress and the physical outcomes. So when we had subjects doing expressive writing, you can see the asthma lung function here increased from 63 to 76% over 4 months. We had a reduction in pain, severity pain for rheumatoid arthritis. Fibromyalgia saw reductions in pain as well as improvements in fatigue and well-being that didn't last for long after the studies, but whilst they were doing the studies, we got some significant outcomes there. And we've also seen some with IBS, mental distress and well-being and alleviating anxiety symptoms as well. So there is a lot of benefit to journaling. I just wanted to bring it back to something which we touched on probably more on in the habits workshop. And for those of you that haven't seen that, it's the first workshop. You can go back and access it, okay? And that is, if we look down the bottom on the left-hand side there, I'm just saying what are some execution tips when it comes to journaling? Because that's one of the things that people struggle with is just consolidating it as a habit, okay? And so one of the things I would say is that, like, when you're trying to consolidate new habits such as journaling, frequency matters. So just kind of like aim to set yourself small goals, and it doesn't have to be anything amazing. You just have to get into the process of doing it consistently, okay? How would you make it unmissable? You could habit stack it. So I've mentioned this plenty of times that I journal in my car. I've had some of you clients, for instance, that have told me that they weren't having good training sessions because of the mental headspace they were going to in the gym. And guess what? I had clients journal in the car before going into train. I'm like, before you go in there, before you leave the car, just write what's going on in your mind for 3 to 5 minutes and then go in and train and then just go in there with a free headspace, okay? And it's worked quite well. You could use a guided journal. So when I first had to get into journaling, I used Mind Journal, which was just a nice way. They've got like, it's like training wheels to start with. You know, circle your feelings, how you're feeling. What were your wins for the day? What are you thinking about? And then from there, after being guided, I found that I no longer needed to be. But it was a real help when I needed training wheels to consolidate it, okay? Yep, I won't spend any much longer because I can tell we're going to burn, go take a bit of time to get through these slides. So Alex, on to the next, man.
Yeah, I just want to pause it just for a second because journaling, please try it, especially for my males in the group who have we've stigmatized engaging with emotions. Graham, you're someone in here and you're welcome to speak as someone who is a middle-aged adult who has grown up with not, if you don't mind me saying, not as being able to engage as a man with their emotions as much due to just how you've grown up and your figures in your life. And the impacts that I've seen with you with journaling have been profound. And I just couldn't recommend it enough. Please, please, please do it. For women, it's generally easier, but for men, please, just it's an outlet. It's not journaling, it's writing. It's like talking, but like you're talking to yourself on a page. Like, just reframe it. Here's a crazy Simpsons meme. I love this.
Absolutely. Journaling is awesome for getting rid of that working memory cognitive clutter. So if you do feel like you're getting overwhelmed by decisions, you're getting overwhelmed by stimulus, journaling is a great way of, like Ben said, like Alex said, taking it all and getting rid of it. Remember, working memory is a transit area. Nothing should stay in there. It should either go in and out or in and then long-term memory. That's it.
Oh, no.
So this is a great way of just spring cleaning that working memory.
Yeah.
Almost each day. It's like, clearing your computer, clearing, your phone doesn't work as well when the storage is full. So that's the same with your brain, your mind, which leads me into the decision fatigue. So this is a very common effect of high stress. And it's essentially the inability to make decisions because you've made too many decisions. There's no trick to it. I like to think of it as a bit like a muscle. You've just trained up your hammies all week, and then you get DOMs and you're out for like, a week. Everything is hard to sit on the toilet, blah, blah, blah. With decision fatigue, it's almost like that. You've exhausted all of the possible decisions you could make, and then even the simplest question of how are you results in like a reaction, an emotional reaction. I don't want to answer. You get, it can manifest as in different ways. I see this a lot in parents, especially working parents, because not only are you responsible for you and your partner, you now have to look, keep a kid alive, and that's stressful in itself. So decision fatigue will pop up pretty much for everyone in some state of their life. So it's really, I really wanted to share some applicable strategies to apply to prevent decision fatigue, or even when you're starting to feel that overwhelm. See, I've got a little bit of a pathology there because I'm a nerd. Too many decisions required leads to working memory overstimulated, leads to fatigue, leads to errors in function, equals stress, equals injury, shutdown, and that's when we get to burnout. And we want to avoid that. And yes, I do love The Simpsons too. And I thought of, old mate in the fridge. I'm just like, look, I'm going to just put him in there. I'm going to make it work. But that's definitely sometimes me. I wake up in the fridge and I'm like, how'd I get here? But I've got 5 steps, five things you can do to manage decision fatigue. And look, they're probably not going to be a surprise, but it might be a different way, different perspective. So automate decisions is the first one. If you did the habit workshop, then you will know automating decisions, habit stacking, making it just foolproof. You get up, you do whatever, and you do X, Y, Z, so you don't have to make a decision, right? So habit stacking is a really great thing to do. Creating a to-do list I've written up there, which kind of doubles onto the second point. Unloading your working memory. So as Ben and Alex have said, journaling, actually getting rid of that cognitive clutter. Again, to-do lists are really good, so you don't have to think on the day, what am I going to do? You've got it written out. Great. Tasks on it. Number 3 is create a schedule. I love schedules. I schedule everything. And that's because I know that I'm prone to stress. So I schedule work, I schedule study. I also have a 1-year-old, by the way. So I have to co-schedule with my husband, but I also schedule me time. We schedule dates. It's all in the calendar. So my husband knows, Soph has 1 hour of her time, because I know if I don't schedule it, I'm going to get that mum guilt. I'm going to be doing something else. So it's also a way of being accountable to my own, health and well-being. And that, reduces fatigue in terms of when am I going to get my me time? Number 4, outsource. That's exactly what I'm doing with my training, nutrition, accountability. It's all Ben's. It's all on Ben's plate, right?
So
Yeah, if you can I'll make him stressed now. But outsourcing decisions is a great thing to do. It's even in your household. Like some days, if I'm aware and I know I'm on the precipice of being a little bit emotionally overwhelmed due to fatigue, decision fatigue, stress, I will tell my husband, "Can you please plan dinner tonight? Can you decide when we're going to go to see my parents? Can you decide, what I'm going to eat next week?" Like things like that. If you can outsource some decisions, it gives you more energy to do what you need to do is the most important. And finally, using focus methods, which I will probably go through in a little bit more detail towards the latter half of the workshop.
I could not recommend outsourcing enough.
Mm.
Meals, cleaning, gardening, unless you like those things. That's fine too.
Unless that's your focus method, which we'll talk about later.
Yes. Now, we have a problem. You train and exercise a lot. Stress ebbs and flows throughout your life. Yes. What do? How do you respond to a reactive stress event in your training?
All right, so I'll take this one. What we're talking about here is heart rate variability, guys. So when it comes to like gauging your recovery, or like how well your body's doing with this total load, this total burdens or stress, we can definitely use a lot of the subjective markers, like how you're feeling, a subjective rating with your energy, your motivation to train, and so on. One of the ways we can quantify it fairly well, because if you have like a wearable, like a lot of the watches or rings that you can get something that's going to measure your resting heart rate and your heart rate variability. Now, we know for general health, I'm pretty sure most of you guys will know that a lower resting heart rate is pretty much a good thing, and it will tend to get better if it's been on the high side, the more aerobically fit and healthy you become. But basically, the heart rate variability is the time between each beats. And unlike what seems to make common sense, which you think that your heart's going to be a metronome, right? You think your heart's going to go boom, 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 and that would be healthy. It turns out that like more variability between each of those beats is a proxy or a telltale of your parasympathetic nervous system. And just a little run through what that means is, when we're talking about being in stress or fight or flight, it's the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. That's going to come with an increase in your vigilance and alertness, an increase in your heart rate. That heart rate does become more like a metronome, okay, a fast metronome, but a metronome. So you lose that variability between the beats, and it's because it's getting the body prepared to do something, okay, because of a stressful event. So if we're permanently in this state, we're going to see that we have a low heart rate variability, okay? And that's not something that we want to have as a foundational part of our life. So when we get a HRV reading, so if you look at your app on your phone and you're looking at your heart rate variability, the one thing I don't want you to do is jump to conclusions just because you have one reading. It's just a snapshot. It's a photo of what's going on, and you can't really act upon that in isolation and go, well, I got a heart rate variability of 33 today, but can't train. That's not exactly how it should be used. Really, what you want to be looking at is the trends over time. Okay, and so if it's like trending down, 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 at the same time you're acknowledging, these external stressors that we're talking about are building up, then you start thinking about, well, what should I be doing here? Okay, and obviously looking at all your stress management techniques is a start, but you could also be then contemplating about what might your training look like because of this increase in allostatic load. And your heart rate variability is telling you that your nervous system is not liking this. And Alex is going to hit that up in the next slide. On this slide, though, it's a little bit small, sorry, but top right hand of the screen, I just wanted to point out this. The HRV and injury, basically what it looks like is this. They've done these studies on CrossFit athletes, and what they've basically discovered is over different volumes of training, if you have a good heart rate variability trend across those, we don't really see any significant increases in injuries. But if we have a low heart rate variability, meaning you're smashed, you know what I mean? Your nervous system's screwed, it's on the trend as that, and your body is just not recovering well, and then you go into high volumes of training, you are at a much greater risk of injury. Okay, and Alex is going to kind of hit up what that should look like. In this left-hand box there, you'll see some of the things that we're looking at from an improvement in heart rate variability, stuff that we're talking about today. So minding your sleep, looking at stress management techniques, deep breathing, just getting your aerobic fitness up and about. They're all ways of improving that heart rate variability. I'll kick it over to Alex now because he's going to basically talk about this from a nuts and bolts perspective, like sets and reps and equipment and the stuff that we do in the gym that if any of you guys are clients, this is literally what we say on those weeks when we know the allostatic load is. Here's how we suggest that you train.
Thank you, Ben. If you guys got questions or comments, again, put them in the top right. And you can measure your HRV with an Oura Ring, a Whoop strap, even Apple Watches. So that's how you can measure it, if you want to know. Now, what do? High stress event, death, illness. You just cooked from training. Something's happened or something has built up. How do we manage it? There's a number of things you can do. There is no perfect way to do it, but I want you guys to all consider these throughout your training journey. And we will do this in the coach-client conversations as we have them. So we typically can take a combination of a volume and intensity deload. Volume being the total amount of sets times reps times load, the total. And the intensity being how hard you are working. I put in big letters, be reactive. Be reactive in the way to something like what we call a deload. For those who don't know, it's a decrease in either a combination or volume or intensity or even training frequency. You be reactive, like we don't want to we all agree, at least Ben and I agree that we don't typically take proactive deloads ahead of time. We take reactive ones because we don't want to just take a step back from training if we don't need to. If you keep getting better, it's working. So a deload, what could we do practically? Instead of doing 1 to 2 reps in reserve, which is RIR there, we drop it down to 3 to 4. So you're keeping more reps in the tank. It's not as hard mentally, physically, central nervous system wise. That's check. That's 1. Okay. So the expectation changes for how hard you're working during a high stress week, event, just really hard deficit. Right? Maybe every single training session doesn't need to be high intensity. And then compound movements are very centrally fatiguing through the nervous system systemically. And they can actually affect HRV to be lower on average and affect your recovery because they require quite a bit of resources to recover from physiologically. That's when it would be a time to pull out the compounds, replace them with isolation and machine movements. So you could take a strategy, you could take a third of the exercises, could be deloaded to a 3 to 4 reps in reserve, while the rest go to like a maintenance, and then a third you decrease in volume. So you could split it if you would like, but the general principle is we need a decrease in frequency, in intensity, and or volume. Because there is a trade-off to continuing those high fatiguing exercises in the gym. You can keep pushing if you'd like to make it a psychological challenge of your life, but we would recommend, like we said at the start with that diagram in the beginning, you adapt and recover, not in the gym. That's when you create the stress and stimulus. So if you compound, more and more, and you just fill your cup up so much, it's going to overfill.
Yeah, if I can add to what Alex is just saying, because like sometimes, especially when I coach a lot of coaches, they'll sort of say, hey, like, how do you like to deload your clients? And I would say, basically to explain what Alex has said, but I go, how do I choose which one to pick? And it's pretty simple. Usually a client will tend to veer on one side of things. So either they're like a really heavy lifter, so lifting extremely high weights, really close to their like 1 to 0 reps in reserve. I'm like, cool. This person's probably going to benefit quite a bit from like taking a break from that. Maybe they're a really high volume client. I'm like, sweet. Guess what? We're probably going to drop down when it's time to deload, and so on and so forth. If they didn't do a lot of frequency, if there was only 2 to 3 days a week, am I going to use frequency as the thing I'm going to drop? Probably not. They're already on the low side of total volume, total frequency. So there are many ways you can try it out. Generally, as written there, I would probably go, look, let's drop the load or the intensity by about a third, and let's drop the volume by about a third and see how that goes. And then you might toggle with something like that just to find the sweet spot so that you can drop that systemic fatigue and then keep going with your recovery and performance.
Yeah, well said. Now, let's land the plane. This is the analogy that I use, and we try to be as efficient as possible through this. We're getting meat and potatoes now, practical strategies. Land the plane. We're very good at taking the plane off, caffeine, train hard, be energetic, but most people just nosedive their plane into their bed. Rather not do that. If we can. You'll probably feel better the 1 hour before bed. Now, I understand. Many of you relate to this. You have two buttons. Yeah, Charlotte, you laughing, I know. You got two options. Memes, TikTok, and Netflix, or sleep. What about the memes, though? I know. Actually, I don't know.
What if there's Simpsons memes?
Oh, look, I'll give you a pass. I'll give you a
The
pass.
dilemma.
They actually help sleep. It's been proven.
Simpsons.
Okay. We all make a choice. There are consequences. Now, first thing to look up, highly, highly recommend. This is a bit of an obscure one. Many of you probably don't know about. It's called NSDR yoga or Yoga Nidra, non-sleep deep rest, coined by Dr. Andrew Huberman. What is it? We'll get you all to lie down. You look up on YouTube, NSDR. You find a voice you like. You listen to it. You follow it. You enter like a pseudo-sleep state. It helps induces a state of calm where our thoughts and state follow our breathing. So we control our state in a much more calm way. Highly recommend after bouts of learning. Because interestingly, little tidbit, you can accelerate the plasticity post-cognitive learning if you do some type of restful state, like breathing, calm, relaxed state after learning. So one of the best things you guys could do is do nothing after you finish this presentation. And most of you will probably want to go to the next thing and the next thing.
I use this concept to make myself feel better when someone falls asleep in my presentations, because I'm like, well, you know what? They're going to remember everything really well that they heard up until falling asleep.
Exactly.
You know, because the sleep is going to help consolidate that in their memory.
Yes, you just find it positive. Okay. We can't just turn off the thoughts. So this allows our thoughts to become fragmented and slowly disintegrate. So could highly, highly recommend. Everybody, I would look this up after you finish today and do it. If you've struggled to fall asleep especially. Next, check out the light behind me. Ooh, it's changing colors. How did I do that? Philips Hue. Could not recommend it more. Philips Hue lights, I can change it to like a red and or multicolored. And why would we want that? We know blue light blunts the creation of... Yeah, oh hello. What's that? Sophia, what you got there?
Giant one. It's a corner. It's a corner light.
Is that
and you can make it like dance to music and stuff, because sometimes I like to have a dance party in here. But yeah, I just changed it from blue to red.
There we go.
Cool.
Oh, Tyler.
Oh, man.
Wow. Look at this king.
Hold on a sec.
Holy moly. How did you make your screen?
The sauna.
No, we just got the old red lamp in the corner there.
Oh, now this is how you do it. Now,
Red light party. Oh,
yeah.
there we go. BC's joined.
look at this. This is like a cascade of... All right, who's next?
It's like I'm in Bangkok.
Red light district, baby. Oh, now, for those who don't know, Ben has like a multi-$1,000 red light panel shining on him. He's flexing hard right now.
It's like he needs sunglasses. Is it that bright?
I'm so relaxed.
Yo. So the message is light. Light stimulates arousal, wakefulness, adrenaline, dopamine. You don't want that now. I don't even like doing these presentations at night because of the light coming out. If I had it my way, we'd do it Saturday, Sunday morning, but then Ben would have to get a divorce. And we don't want that.
This is so true.
We don't want that, right? Because he's got children. I mean, think about the children.
Is my wife in here right now?
Shout out to
No,
Zoe.
she's not. She's not.
Now, tranquilo, it's Spanish for calm, I think. We want to go low stress. Red light, low light. Make it exactly what Tyler's doing. Tyler, exactly like that. I have the red light, the glasses. Just look at Tyler and copy that. You will sleep better. You will be calmer. Even you can do it on your laptop while you're watching something.
And watch The Simpsons before bed.
Son, don't spoil the next one. That's exactly what we're going to talk about. A little secret hack. Quickly, supplementally, nutrition-wise, I credit Ben for elucidating a lot of the. Well, that's a fancy word. I'll just say English. Ben for illuminating a lot of the science on how this works. You all have a best friend. His name is Sam. Sam is like Buddha. So Buddha's calm, right? Buddha Sam helps us break down these excess hormones that we have that stimulate arousal during stress. Now, to summon the Buddha Sam, right? Sam is like an enzyme, by the way. But to summon this Buddha Sam, we need certain nutrients, okay? B vitamins, zinc, magnesium. There's a reason these vitamins actually help to break down catecholamines, to break down these stress hormones, and why often we tell our clients, we tell you guys to take magnesium with your last meal before sleep. Exception, a small minority will actually go the other way. Small minority, so just be aware. But most of you will get great benefits out of doing that. Now, I don't want to go through fancy science. You can read more in the little dot points. The phone, put it on airplane mode 2 hours before bed. Put it away in a cupboard. It needs to be away. Make it invisible. Atomic Habits Workshop 1. Leave it in the bathroom before going to bed. Buy a second phone. I have 2 phones here. Not because I'm a drug dealer on the side. If you can afford it, buy a second phone because I have one for night. No one can contact me. It's impossible. Why? Because how do you feel when you look at your phone? That's why. Alarm, analog clock, put the phone on the other side of the room, like figure it out. But I can't stress that enough because the phone is associated with stress. Now, Tyler, this is where you come in. Tyler, we're going to go over a little bit, but I'm going to bring him up to the stage. Tyler, can you unmute yourself and tell the people what I told you to do? I've told someone else to do this recently. And what was happening to you at night with your mind?
Yeah, essentially, I thought I was nailing my nightly routine. Like I was chucking the phone in the bin, all electronics off, got my red light, my blue light blocking glasses, was like meditating, reading before bed, no electronics. And I'd still be so like aroused and stimulated before bed, like I couldn't sleep. And then I think, yeah, it was yourself that gave me the recommendation, like, why don't you watch some cartoons? And then, yeah, we started incorporating that. And then, yeah, within 10 minutes, you can't stay awake. Like, and it sort of goes against everything that we sort of get told, like, you know, no TV, no electronics, dark, but it's been a game changer. Currently not on The Simpsons, I'm on Friends at the moment. It's been nice and light.
Hey.
Nice and light to fall asleep too.
Friends, Seinfeld, I think is better. Simpsons.
It's all good.
Find something that, thank you for that, that is short, uplifting, episodic entertainment, makes you smile, makes you laugh, eases the stress, distracts your mind, goes to a different universe. I said they're scientifically designed to be parasympathetic. That's not true. I don't think there's research. That's a joke. Just try it. There's a difference between Stranger Things, which I have a rule. I can't watch that late at night. That's too much. I'm ready to fight demogorgons and shit, right? I can't. Just not. Right? And The Simpsons.
Don't watch
now my
House of
clients are
Dragon.
thinking you're such a cooler coach than me, though, bro. I got to tell you that because
Oh, no.
you're recommending The Simpsons. Do you know what I recommend to my clients? David Attenborough.
Oh, that's nice, though.
That's good.
Man, like
But
you
look.
put David Attenborough on, you watch a couple of Penguins,
Yeah,
and I'm telling you,
that's
like
nice.
it is very chilled.
The only thing I'm down about that is I don't want to wear my blue blockers during that because it's so beautiful. But
Okay.
I love how calm that is. That's a great suggestion. Now, focus and mindfulness practices. Hope that was interesting.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, last night I made the error of watching House of Dragon,
Oh,
and I didn't get to sleep for like 3 hours.
really?
I don't know. I was like, "That's the worst, the worst thing to do." So I literally had to just like get up and like do something mindless because
Wow.
yeah, it was just too stimulating for me. I just forgot how gory Game of Thrones was, and I was like, "Oh, too much." So yeah, don't watch it before bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch it in the morning when you're about to face the day, and you can motivate yourself to go forward. So in terms of actual other practices that you can use, now this is one that I really like because I'm not a clear your mind type of person. I struggle really hard to quieten my brain. I go to bed and every terrible memory of my life comes flooding back, and I question every decision I've ever made in my life. And then you think, oh, and your brain just keeps going, and you try to problem solve things that haven't really happened. So this is actually some of these techniques. My background is I was a secondary school teacher, fresh out of uni. And this a method we used to use with our ASD kids and kids that presented with behavioral issues was we used to give them like a stress ball in class, and they would just play with it and while we were teaching. And we found that they actually retained more information that we communicated when they had the stress ball as opposed to just making them sit there with the rest of the class. They were more disruptive without it. They were disrupting other students. And we found that this stress ball was kind of a focal anchor for them. They were able to really anchor their attention and focus into one thing, which stopped or prevented other stimulus from kind of getting into that working memory and distracting them as easily. So whatever information we're hearing was kind of had room to come in. So this is kind of, I took this principle and I started looking up things like active meditations. Guided meditations was the first thing I came across where, you hear the voice. And so you focus on the voice instead of just focusing on sounds, the voice telling you what to do. And that allowed me to kind of quieten down all the other voices in my head and anchored my focus. So active meditation or forms of that I really find useful. Simple things like reading a book, something that takes focus to do one thing as opposed to five things. Listening to actual like music. I love eating, which is something that Alex has been showing us how meditative eating is. Putting all of your focus into that whole sensory experience of the gloriousness of food can be quite calming for the mind and helps with digestion. So that's a double whammy. Something my husband added was household chores. He actually finds mundane tasks relaxing for his mind because he runs a business. He's up here all day. He comes home, he does the dishes. Doesn't need to think about anything but doing the dishes. Yeah, BC, you're the
I'm
dish man
exactly
as
the same.
well.
I hate all other chores, but dishes is my little time out.
Yeah, it's bizarre, but it works for some people. So don't knock it till you try it because it just takes away all of that kind of clutter. Another thing that I kind of discovered, I was introduced to a couple of years ago, was binaural and monaural beats, which I thought was really interesting. I'm still looking up things about it, but it works on brain waves and the various waves that your brain, the frequency your brain kind of works at to stimulate certain characteristics and certain effects. So I've got here just a very simple diagram of the 5 different waves that we kind of know of and what that could kind of stimulate within the brain. And I use binaural beats when I have to work or study and I really need to focus on the task. So if you don't know what binaural beats or monaural beats are, it's like a tone of sound that goes in one ear for binaural beats and another tone in your other ear. And then it comes together and makes a third tone, which kind of activates kind of stimulates the frequencies that you're trying to engage based on the effects you want. And I found it actually really effective for me to calm myself down in order to work or study. and retain information. And I will keep it on. I think I've linked you to an article there that actually they were kind of testing binaural versus monaural, but the consensus was putting on binaural beats, which is kind of ambient sound, 20 to 30 minutes prior to engaging in a focus activity, and leaving it on about 20 minutes after. For example, doing nothing after you've learned something actually helps keep you in that calm state, especially if you can't go straight to sleep afterwards or have a nap. You kind of have to stay awake. Keeping that soundscape on for like the complete duration of your study or work can actually help consolidate all of that learning and cognition. So that's something that I've been using, and I find it calms me because my brain is very overactive. To some other people, it might not make a difference, but it's definitely something you can try. Just YouTube. Binaural beats.
I'm going to play some now if you don't mind.
Yeah, play some now. My favorite one is the one that has study, like huge on the picture, because that's what I use. I think they use alpha and beta frequency. So it's kind of one ear you're hearing restful stimulus, on the other ear you're hearing busy, I need to think stimulus, and it creates this kind of homeostatic frequency.
I don't know if you can hear this.
No.
Can you hear it?
Nah, I think there's a problem with Discord getting that through sometimes.
It's all right. You can find so many different types on YouTube, and the difference just between monaural and binaural. Monaural is just single ear. Binaural is two. A lot of people like the binaural because if it goes through one ear, it's kind of imbalancey. So for nice balance, a lot of people prefer binaural beats. And something that is really simple that I like to do is I keep a notepad on me pretty much at all times. And, if you have to focus and you get an idea and it comes into your working memory and you want to remember it, write it down. Like I pause, I write it down in the moment. So it's already out of my working memory and I can come back to it. And I won't forget. It's just a simple tool. My husband does it all the time. He'll be halfway through a conversation, be like, sorry, Soph, I just need to get this out of my head. And he writes it down and then he's like, cool, I'm back in the conversation. And it's a great way to, one, be respectful to the person you're having a conversation with or spending time with, but it also helps you pay attention and be more present in the situation that's in front of you. So my handy dandy notebook, like Blue's Clues, just write it down as it comes to you. Yeah, you can tell I've got a kid.
Nearly done.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm just aware that the time's just gone 8 o'clock, guys. I can just reassure you that we're just about sort of finishing up now. Sophia's got this slide. I've got a very short one, and just in case anyone's wondering. But Sophia, take it away.
Well, this is very self-explanatory. This is one method I use, at least very recently, I use quite a bit to declutter my life. So when you do get to a point, if you do get to a point where you're heading to burnout, you've missed all the flags or you've disregarded the flags and your body's telling you, I'm going to shut down, you need to do something, I adapted the Eisenhower's matrix or quadrant, the important urgent into important fulfilling. So this is how I decided what stayed in my schedule and what was out of my schedule. So to be really simple and clear, quadrant 1, important and fulfilling, stays because it ticks both boxes. Quadrant number 4, not important, not fulfilling, goes in the bin. We don't need it right now. It might be something you want to come back to in the future. That's future you stuff to decide later on. But right now we don't want it. The only thing you need to kind of discuss with you, if you live with someone else, are quadrants 2 and 3. What's important but might not be fulfilling? This could be like a certain job where, you have to meet financial goals. It's not really fulfilling, but it's important to pay off, mortgage or your home loan, something like that. Quadrant number 3, not important but fulfilling, could be, a hobby that you just jumped into maybe 3 or 4 days a week. Is there a way to reduce it, or is it something you have to pause and come back to? So 2 and 3 are something that is based on your own perception and what you deem is necessary for your life. So this is just a little little activity or exercise if you do feel like you're getting to that point, to easily cut the fat from your life. You don't need that.
All right, guys, I'm just going to bring it home with some mindful practices. Now, some of them, there's already been a bit of crossover, so I'm wary of the time, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will make sure that they're available on the cheat sheet that'll come out in the next day or two. So the one that I did want to bring to mind, and a lot of what we discussed today, there's so much crossover with any talk on self-control and willpower. You know, when Sophia was talking about decision fatigue, for instance, you know, that making so many decisions, leads to that inability to then make the best choice, okay, which would call a lack of willpower or lack of self-control. And the example we always use in like health and fitness and nutrition is like, you know, you have a really stressful day, like a lot of things have happened. You get to the end of the day, you don't have dinner prepared, and you've already made so many decisions. You have decision fatigue, and you just have general like fatigue. And that's when you're really vulnerable to just making a poor dinner choice or making a poor dessert choice or something like that. And so some of these things come along with things like cravings or, other willpower challenges. And one of the things that I will always talk about in that kind of topic is this practical urge surfing. Okay, so surfing the urge. And surfing the urge is just a really simple technique where you basically you're noting first and foremost. You're basically just saying, hey, listen, I notice now that I have a craving or that something has triggered me or I'm stressed and I'm about to engage in a behavior which is not what I want to be doing. So whether that's eating something that you don't really want to be eating right now, whether it's reaching for your phone but your phone's giving you stress and whatever it is, okay? And it's just about noting or labeling, acknowledging the fact, hey, this is how I'm feeling right now. And then simply saying to yourself, it's okay that I feel like that. Everyone kind of feels like this. You're not alone. You're not a special snowflake. I'm sorry to tell you that. Everyone has these kind of challenges. So just remember that. And so what you can tell we're doing here is we're just pausing, we're delaying, okay, giving yourself time, take some deep breaths, acknowledge what's happening inside. So just internally, how do you feel right now? You might say, I feel like my heart rate's elevated. I feel hot, like I feel, But then just say, look, like any kind of craving or like short-term gratification style behavior that you're about to engage in, it dissipates. It's like a wave. It's going to have a peak. And then like all waves, they crash. Okay, so cravings is a really good example in that if you can just delay a craving for 90 seconds, you will often find that you can not go ahead and engage in that behavior. And so it's just about having a plan in place for when that arises, because the last thing you can do when you've got decision fatigue and it's the end of the day and you're stressed out is come back to one of the cheat sheets we give you after this fucking seminar and there's like 15 things on and go, which one should I do? Because I haven't planned it out yet, right? That's making another decision. So the point would be, no, if X happens, then I do Y. It's a automation. Okay. If X happens, then I do Y. And it might be in going into that script that I just said. It's like I'm craving ice cream. It's okay that I'm craving ice cream. People crave ice creams. I'm sitting in my couch. I'm kind of feeling like I just want to get up and go to the freezer and get my ice cream. I'm just going to take 10 deep breaths, and then go through the process. You can say it out loud if you want, whatever it is. But the point is that you have a plan in place. If X happens, then I'm going to do Y. And you'll see, I won't go into them right now, but you'll see that there's other things up there, like there's the pause and plan, or there's the delay and distraction, so on and so forth. The delay and distraction is one thing that I'll often do in that I'm working from home, my office is there, outside is my backyard. So if I'm feeling like I'm not getting where I want to be with work, or I'm flicking through like my tabs, I'm basically, succumbing to the willpower challenges of like just digital life, then I will take a walk outside. Okay, you know what you need to do? You need to get up, you need to stretch your legs, you need to go out in the sun, you need to deep breathe, and then you come back. And that's just one of my automations for when I'm procrastinating or being less efficient than I want to be with work. So I'm engaging in a behavior which I don't want to be. And guys, that is the end of the formalities. We ran 8 minutes over, so that is not too bad for us. We really appreciate you for your time, but we're not just going to hang up. I think we are here. If anyone wants to unmute yourselves and just, if you've got a general comment or a question or something that you'd like to add, please go for it.
Yeah, how'd you guys find that? See if I can move this.
We're on Zen now.
I want to. Yeah, Tyler.
Yeah, good man. Pity I could only get here for the last 15 minutes. So I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch some of the earlier stuff. But yeah, reinforced a lot of habits, and there was some good stuff at the end there with the binaural beats, which I'm keen to implement with work.
Same.
One.
I also want to take you guys through some breathing. Once you guys ask some questions, we can do like a little group breathing activity together and put this into practice.
Have you seen the chat?
You would.
Yeah, I can hear Simpsons downstairs, to be honest. So I'm itching to go.
Who else is in here? Charlotte, what was your main takeaway? You can write or voice. What stood out to you?
It's interesting just to kind of hear it and like reflect it on yourself and be like, oh crap, I actually do all of that stuff. Like I'm such a stress head, and like trying to figure out what kind of stress person I am that you're talking about at the start. I'm definitely someone that takes everything on board and also tries to somehow find an answer for everything at once. And I think that's what's stressful. But like, implementing the tips and ideas you have, just kind of removing yourself from that situation, taking a breath and understanding, control your controllables and, taking the stressful things out of my life. Like, yeah, I probably don't need TikTok every night before bed. That's probably not going to help. And I could be doing some better stuff like journaling or, like listening to some breathing exercises that is going to get me into a deeper sleep and feel better about myself. So, yeah.
That's a good reflection.
Yeah, I think it's like one of the most common things that, I deal with as a coach is that just explaining the fact that human beings were never wired to be constantly wired. That's it. Do you know what I mean? And we just, I'm an online coach. The amount of time I spend on a computer, like in the last 5 years compared to anything before that with like previous jobs, roles, careers, whatever, is just so insane right now that I'm actually very thankful that I am a coach. And the reason is that I have to have these conversations every other day, right? Which reminds me to also do these things. So I noticed, like, if I'm talking to Sophia, like we had this talk not last week, but probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, right? Where Sophia just had so much on board with uni, with launching businesses, with coming back from postpartum and it being like a really long journey back postpartum in training. And for those of you who don't know, Sophia's husband is a pediatric physiotherapist. So, she's very into that world with the whole rehabilitation. But Sophia just takes on board everything. Right. And then I'm so glad because like I was going to do a life coaching session with you. Remember, I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down and we're going to get your schedule and we're going to do all this stuff. And she beat me to it, of course, because this is just Sophia. So by the time I touched base with her next, she actually just ran through everything that she did. And we never needed that meeting because she emptied out. She used the quadrant, right? And
Millhouse, you're cut.
Millhouse
is cut. Millhouse is cut.
By what?
Dad
Simpsons reference. Oh, sorry.
Oh. I thought you said my mouth was cut. Yes. Yeah. No, it was amazing. Like, because as a coach, it's nice, right? Because like it was like planting a seed and then you did everything. I just kind of said, hey, I think this is what we need to do. And then you went away and did the rest. And it's ever since you did that, like it's been incredible.
I'm a new person. Like, yeah, you don't realize how much weight you carry mentally until you kind of, cut the cords and let the balloons just fly off. And you're like, whoa, this is what it feels like to actually have time that's not scheduled, but I can just chill and not feel guilty like I should be doing something else. So, yeah.
And I can share an experience by myself, actually, or of myself, and that's this. I found myself saying a lot over the last 3 to 6 months is that the one thing about parenting that I really underestimated was the fact that my weekends are the hardest part of my week. So I've always worked pretty hard. You know, I'm up at 3:45 every day. I start work at 4 o'clock. I finish work at 4:30 p.m. and then I parent from 4:30 till 7:30. And then I don't have to put much effort in with my sleep anymore because I am wrecked, right? So I get to sleep pretty easily and get my 7.5 hours sleep. But I've been able to sustain that because the weekends, prior to having kids, because the weekends I would, not that I would oversleep on the weekends, but I wouldn't be wired either. You know, and I wouldn't have responsibilities that you have being so vigilant with parenting, and there are literally like no days off. And the one thing that was crushing me in the last 12 months since having our second boy was just realizing that now, like with 2 kids, it's like literally, you think you're going to have some kind of economies of scale. It's only going to be as hard as 1.5. That's how dumb I thought having his second kid. And I've realized, oh shit, no, it was like compounding interest. It was actually way, way harder than I thought. And it's basically meant that I've had to reevaluate what I say yes to during the week. And I had to say this to my wife. I had to actually say it out loud so that, not because I don't like to burden her with anything, right? It's just my personality type. But I had to say it out loud because I'm like, if you don't say this out loud and you're getting that accountability, it's like getting a coach, right? If you don't say it out loud to her, you're never going to follow through with the saying no to things. And she'll kind of help keep me accountable to going, don't go beyond your current clientele. Don't overcommit yourself to this. Don't say yes to that new thing. And it's been very, very powerful. And that was like a realization with me looking at who I am now with 2 kids. I just do not have the capacity to do what I did prior to that.
Noted for the future.
100%. Weekends become like more active than the weekdays. Yeah, our weekends are like, where are we going next? Where are we taking him next? Then you're like all day on him. I'm like, oh man, I wish I could go to work. Like just to have your away time. So yeah, resonates.
This is what gives me so much respect for mothers. You know what I mean? Like it's just, I kind of have to take full, you know, like share the load actually I should say, but like full time on the weekends. And I'm like, I think about my wife, Zoe, having to have done that throughout maternity leave before she went back to work, like Monday through Friday, pretty much without me. And I'm like, I have no idea how you're not dead, or at least in a loony bin. You know what I mean? Because yeah, it's so incredible. It's so much work.
Anybody else got anything else before we do some breathing? Talk of theory. Now let's do practice. Here's what we do. We're going to do some breathing, and then they're all going to go watch The Simpsons with some red light. Okay? I encourage you guys all to do this. If you want to control your state, your mind, your body, control your breath. Everybody close their eyes down. I'm going to do it. I won't know if you guys are doing it. I'm just going to trust you will. Okay? Try and get comfortable. Lean back. You're going to go nasal, breath in, exhale with your mouth out. But first, just observe. Observe how you're breathing. Mouth breathing, nasal breathing. Where do you begin the breath? Where do you end the breath? How short, sharp, shallow is it? How long is it? Then, you guys are going to follow my lead. We're going to take a deep nasal breath in for 4 seconds, and we're going to try your best to double it with the 6, 7, 8 second exhale. Do your best, okay? Follow my lead. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. In. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then regulate the next few breaths on your own. I'm going to go. Try and breathe from the belly, inflate lower, middle, then upper chest. Slow, long exhale. You can blink or open the eyes. I don't know if anyone's still here. Oh, okay, there are. And come back. And just see how you feel. How do you guys feel? Same? Better? Worse? Did it give you some like anxiety?
That's what I needed. I don't breathe when I present, which is actually kind of cool that I'm presenting with 2 other people because it gives me a chance to breathe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I still really, really struggle with mindful breathing and trying to really prolong the exhales. Like I might get 3 or 4 breaths in. This is what I'm doing on my own. I might get 3 or 4 breaths in, and then I just my mind drifts, or I really struggle. Like I'm almost like gasping for air, sort of thing. I'm like chasing the next breath. So yeah, I know it's something I really need to work on. So whenever I go for a walk, or I might be preparing meals or doing the dishes, whatever, I'll really try and focus on that 4-second inhale, bit of a hold, 6 to 8 second exhale. But yeah, something I still struggle with. It's a skill that I'm working on.
What part do you struggle with? The exhale? The inhale? What part?
Yeah, sort of as I said, like just I find myself chasing the next breath, almost like I'm running out of air, and then, or if I'm doing it mindfully, I might get 4 or 5 breaths in, and then my mind wanders, and then I just stop and I just lose it, and I'm just back to normal breathing.
Well, the mind wandering is certainly normal. I was under the impression before I did my yoga teacher training that, meditation, the mind should be empty. No, not at all. It's not empty cup. It's an exercise in bringing the mind back to the breath, and it's totally normal for the mind to go, but it's like you're trying to make it's muddy water, and you're just trying to make the muddy water just a little bit less clear. If we set the expectation to have a clear mind, it will be constant disappointment. The goal is definitely not to have a clear, empty mind. It is to just mindful breathing. Just make it as simple as that, and you can win and be successful.
What you just said then was the exact, because I knew about meditating but didn't meditate for a good 10 years, right? Because I would try and then, fail how I perceived failing, because I really didn't have a good understanding of what I was trying to achieve, and similar to what you're saying, Tyler. And then I heard it worded pretty much as Alex just described, in that, like, I think somebody actually said, like, every time you have to bring yourself back to the presence because your mind has drifted, it's like doing a rep. And that struck a chord with me. I'm like, oh, okay. It's like skill acquisition. It's like getting better at a lift here. I was like, okay, now I can see. And so every time I would bring myself, this sounds so cheesy. I realize as I'm about to say what I'm about to say next, but I'm going to say it anyway. But every time I would bring myself back, I would kind of like almost smile a little bit. I was like, there we go. There's a rep. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like, it got the perfectionist out of what I was trying to do. Because that's the thing. I hate being shit at stuff. Like Sophia's like, yeah, I hate being shit at stuff too, right? And so that's what kind of held me back from like actually consolidating the new habit of meditating, was that expectation as you describe it.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I've never heard that before. Getting reps in.
Yeah, consider that.
If that works,
really good.
Oh, you can't credit me because I think someone else said it to me. But anyway,
we're all just stealing shit in this industry anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Mate, 100%.
Nothing's new. This whole workshop, we got off the internet. We didn't even make it. Just all off the internet. Simpsons memes and everything.
We got it off. We were at the Fiverr. We delegated, right?
Yeah.
That's why there was that sentence on Alex's slide that was half finished. I don't know if anyone said that, but it went willing, and then there was no words after it.
We ran out of money.
The Fiverr guy.
We couldn't pay him anymore.
But look, guys, I just want to thank everyone for coming again. We really appreciate you guys all attending, and it means a lot to all 3 of us. And The recording will go up very soon. The cheat sheet will go up very soon after it as well, which is just going to be like a practical guide of what you saw on the slides. And if you have any questions at all, some of you guys are clients, that's great. Some of you guys are not, and you've got us at your disposal in the Discord. So hit us up in one of the chats or DMs, and we'd be happy to go through things with you.
And just because you guys made it to the end, here's a little snippet. Well, you guys might have heard we got a private podcast coming very soon, and we're going to be doing some private live in-person events very soon as well. So stay tuned for that. We want to get all around the little family community together.
Dropping that already, mate. You couldn't wait.
Just plant the seed. Now we have to do it. See? Hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right.
Much
Thanks,
love.
everyone, and have a good night.
Land
Thank
the
you.
plane.